She posted 20 times a day. Every meal, every mirror selfie, every fleeting mood swing dressed up as a relatable moment. Every humble brag disguised as gratitude. She documented her entire life in real time for hundreds of strangers on the internet. And when the one man who actually loved her quietly disappeared from her audience, she chose her followers over him. Not because she was cruel, not because she didn't care, but because somewhere along the way, the performance had become more important than the relationship. This is the story of a man who tried, genuinely, patiently, for months, to tell the woman he loved that the person she was presenting to the internet was slowly destroying what they had built in real life. He said it carefully. He said it kindly. He said it over and over again. And every single time, she shut it down. So one day, he stopped watching. He deleted the apps. He unfollowed the accounts. He chose to only know her the way a boyfriend is supposed to know a girlfriend, directly, privately, face to face. And she lost her mind. And then she lost him. This is what happens when someone chooses their audience over the one person who actually knew them. Let me take you back to where this started. Let me be clear about something before we go any further. This is not a story about a controlling man. I know that's where some of you are going, because the moment a man says he's uncomfortable with his girlfriend's social media habits, there's an immediate instinct to assume the worst. So let's establish the facts right now before we go anywhere else. His name for this story is Marcus. He was 30 years old. He worked hard. He had a life that made sense to him. Friends he trusted, habits he'd built, values he held on to. He wasn't anti-social media. He wasn't some kind of analog purist who thought Instagram was a sign of civilization collapsing. He was just a man who was 8 months into a relationship with a woman he genuinely loved and who had started to feel slowly and then all at once like something was quietly slipping away. And she was, when they were together, face to face, everything. She was 27, and in person, she had a quality that is genuinely rare. She made you feel seen. Not in a performative way, not in the way people do when they want something from you, but in the real, quiet way. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. She remembered things. She laughed a laugh you couldn't fake. The real one, the one that catches you off guard at unexpected moments and makes you feel like you're in on something. Every person Marcus brought her around came away converted. His friends liked her immediately. His family adored her. People who were skeptical going and walked out saying the same thing. She's the real thing. She's genuinely great. And Marcus knew he had found something worth protecting. For the first 4 months of their relationship, everything was close to perfect. She had almost no social media presence, a mostly dormant Facebook, nothing else. They talked. They spent time together. They built the kind of intimacy that only comes from being present with someone instead of performing for them. But around the 4-month mark, something changed. And Marcus was the last person to understand just how much. An over-the-shoulder medium shot of a young woman sitting cross-legged on a couch in a softly lit apartment, fully absorbed in her phone. Multiple app icons glow as she switches rapidly between them. Posting, scrolling, posting again. In the background, slightly out of focus, a man sits on the far end of the couch watching television alone, his posture closed, turned slightly away. The physical distance between them is small, but the emotional distance is vast. Warm ambient lighting undercut by the cold blue of her phone screen. Shot with a 35mm lens, shallow depth of field. Quiet, melancholic mood. 16:9 widescreen landscape. Cinematic realism. Grounded drama. Let me paint this picture clearly, because I think it's easy to dismiss 20 posts a day as a minor annoyance unless you understand what it actually feels like to live inside it. The morning begins with a breakfast photo. The point isn't the breakfast. The point is the documentation of the breakfast. The caption implies that this particular Tuesday morning, this particular cup of coffee, is somehow meaningful or beautiful or worth sharing with an audience. Then a Snapchat story about something funny that happened while making said breakfast. Then an Instagram story. Then a Facebook status about how she's feeling today, grateful or overwhelmed or reflective, with enough detail to make sure nobody missed the emotional nuance. By noon, 3 to 5 more posts. By evening, add 5 more. A blog entry that is somehow simultaneously humble, and a brag. A second round of Instagram stories. A Facebook status about how exhausted she is from such a full and meaningful day. And here is the detail that started to genuinely wear on Marcus in a way he couldn't simply dismiss. On the days she complained the most, the day she messaged him saying she was swamped, overwhelmed, too stressed to talk, barely keeping her head above water with her freelance work. Those are the days the social media activity was at its absolute peak. He would get a text saying she had too much going on to call. Then, 40 minutes later, a Snapchat, then an Instagram story, then a Facebook rant about how impossibly busy she was. He wasn't imagining it. He checked. He tracked it, not to build a case against her, but because he needed to know he wasn't losing his mind. He wasn't. His friends had started noticing too. People who had met her in person, people who genuinely, immediately liked her, would follow her accounts and come back to Marcus with this quiet, uncomfortable expression. She seems kind of different online, they'd say. Kind of a lot. Marcus knew exactly what they meant, because the person he loved in private and the person she was online felt like two completely different people. And lately, he was spending more time with the one he didn't recognize. Marcus is not a confrontational person. I want to make that clear. He didn't storm in with a list of demands. He didn't deliver an ultimatum. He tried, genuinely and repeatedly, to just let it go. He told himself it wasn't his business how she used her own social media accounts. He tried to teach their own approach. He tried looking away. He tried scrolling past. He tried accepting that some people process their lives differently. But here's something nobody talks about when it comes to this specific kind of problem. The just ignore it approach only works when the behavior exists in its own separate compartment, sealed off from the relationship. This one didn't. This one was the relationship. Think about what makes a romantic relationship different from any other relationship in your life. The answer, if you strip everything else away, is intimacy. Not physical intimacy, emotional intimacy. The specific, particular closeness of being the person who really knows someone. Not their public face. Not their curated online persona. Their private self. The version that only comes out when the performance is off and the audience has gone home. That version is what Marcus fell in love with. And that version was disappearing. When your partner broadcasts 20 posts a day to hundreds of followers, the private texture of a person, the things that make them three-dimensional, that make you feel like you're the one who really knows them, gets distributed. Share out. Spread thin across an audience of strangers who have now received all the same access you thought was yours alone. Marcus began to feel like subscriber number 301. Not her boyfriend, not the person closest to her, just another set of eyes in the feed, waiting for the next update. And when he tried to tell her that, carefully, without accusation, just honestly, the way you're supposed to be able to talk to someone you love, she didn't engage with it. She shut it down. Every single time. The same conversation, the same wall, the same result. And Marcus was starting to understand that talking was not going to be enough. Let's slow down here for a second, because I want you to notice something about the pattern that Marcus was stuck in. He wasn't asking her to quit social media entirely. He wasn't asking her to become someone she wasn't or to abandon something that brought her joy. He was asking her to hear him, to take seriously, not immediately agree with, not capitulate to, but simply take seriously the idea that her behavior was affecting their relationship, to at least consider that his feelings were valid. And she wouldn't do it. Every time he brought it up, the conversation ended exactly the same way. She became defensive almost immediately. And I want to be precise about this word because there's a difference between hurt and defensive. Hurt says, I didn't realize this was affecting you. Tell me more. Defensive says, the problem is not what I'm doing. The problem is what you're saying about it. She had a right to use social media however she wanted. He was trying to control her. He was making something out of nothing. It was just an app. It wasn't real life. She didn't understand why he couldn't just accept this part of her. Here's what struck Marcus, and what I want you to sit with too. When someone is genuinely confident their behavior is fine, they don't get defensive when you question it. They get curious. They want to understand why you're bothered. They ask questions. They meet you in the discomfort. The speed and intensity of her defensiveness was its own kind of answer. One she maybe wasn't ready to say out loud. Because Marcus was increasingly starting to believe that the 20 posts a day, the compulsive documentation, the hunger for likes and comments and followers, all of it was filling something. An insecurity, a wound, a need for external validation that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with something older, harder to name, harder to fix. She wasn't ready to look at that, and the conversations were going nowhere. Marcus had tried talking. He had tried patience. He had tried letting it go. Now, he was going to try something different, something quiet and simple and completely reasonable. And it was going to set everything on fire. One evening, a quiet one, nothing dramatic about it. Marcus made a decision. He wasn't in the middle of a fight. He wasn't fueled by anger or hurt. He was just sitting with his phone, scrolling through her latest round of posts, and he felt the familiar low-grade exhaustion settle in. And a thought occurred to him. A simple one. What if he just stopped watching? Not as a punishment, not as a statement, not as a tactic designed to make her feel a particular way, just as an act of basic, quiet self-preservation. What if he removed himself from her audience, deleted the apps, unfollowed the accounts, and chose to only experience her the way he was supposed to? In person, directly, privately. The information about her life, her day, her feelings. He could wait for her to tell him. The way couples are supposed to do it. He could still love her. He could still be her boyfriend. He just didn't have to be her viewer. He thought about it for a few minutes. He considered how she might react. He knew it wasn't nothing. He knew she would notice. But he also knew that every other approach had failed. The conversations hadn't worked. The patience hadn't worked. The trying to let it go hadn't worked. So he deleted Snapchat. He unfollowed her on Instagram. He removed himself from her Facebook feed. It took about 4 minutes. And now I want you to notice what he did and did not do here, because it matters. He didn't call her out publicly. He didn't post a vague complaint about oversharing. He didn't issue an ultimatum. He didn't demand she change anything about how she used her own accounts. He just quietly, privately, without any fanfare at all, opted out of consuming her content. That was the full extent of what he did. She noticed within hours. Not within days. Within hours. Across 4 platforms, posting to hundreds of followers 20 times a day, and the one person whose absence registered immediately, the single missing viewer she noticed right away, was Marcus. And she immediately needed to know why. Think about what that tells you. A wide shot of a man standing in the doorway of an apartment, his posture cautiously open, one hand resting on the doorframe. Across from him, a woman sits rigidly on the couch, arms folded tightly, jaw set, her expression barely controlled rage beneath a thin surface of calm. The space between them is charged. The apartment is lit by the flat, cold light of an overcast afternoon coming through a large window. No warmth. The silence between them is visible, shot with a 35mm lens from slightly outside the doorway, both figures framed in the composition. 16:9 widescreen landscape, cinematic realism, grounded drama. The argument that followed lasted hours. She'd spent a day thinking about what Marcus had done and had arrived at a conclusion, that what he'd done wasn't an act of self-preservation. It was a drastic, unilateral act of aggression, a decision made without her consent, without discussion, without any acknowledgement of how it would make her feel. And that was not acceptable. Marcus walked through his reasoning again. He had tried to discuss it. Multiple times. Those discussions had gone nowhere. This felt like the only remaining option that didn't require anything from her. She was not interested in that argument. She pivoted instead to a position that Marcus hadn't fully anticipated. Her social media persona, she said, wasn't as bad as he was making it out to be. He was wrong in his perception of how it came across. And more than that, this was a real and valid part of who she was. A part of her personality she was not willing to apologize for. And she needed someone in her life who could love all of her, not just the parts that happened to be convenient. Marcus found an article, a thoughtful, well-written piece by someone with zero connection to either of them, a piece that laid out clearly and specifically how the behaviors she was describing registered to other people. Not just him, to the world at large. He wasn't weaponizing it. He was trying, one last time, to show her that what he was describing wasn't a personal vendetta. It was a pattern that other people recognized too. She read it, and then she looked at him and said, "Is that really so bad?" He pressed. He said, gently, but without backing down, yes. Most people, when they discover they come across as self-absorbed or attention-seeking, would want to know, would want to correct it. And she delivered a speech. A full, earnest, genuinely held speech. Not in anger, not in defensiveness, but with conviction on why selfishness and vanity were actually positive qualities. Why she saw nothing wrong with how she presented herself. Why he was the one with the problem. I want you to really hear that. Not defensiveness, not denial. A constructed argument, delivered with belief that what he was describing wasn't a flaw at all. That was the moment Marcus understood that there was nothing left to save. They broke up that night. Not an explosive, final anger, or not only in that. Underneath the fight, there was something quieter. Something that felt less like a battle and more like two people finally saying the honest thing. This doesn't work. We are not compatible. And when those words were spoken out loud, there wasn't much left to argue about. She was right that she deserved someone who loved all of her. She did. We all do. But Marcus also deserved someone whose first instinct, when he disappeared from her social media audience, was to ask why he felt so distant, not to demand an explanation for a missing view count. Here's what stays with me about this story. She was not a bad person. Marcus never said she was, and I'm not saying it either. Every single person who knew her in real life, every friend, every family member, everyone who sat across from her at a table and talked to her, came away liking her. She was genuinely funny, genuinely warm. She made people feel seen. The person she was in private was worth loving. But she had built a second self. An online version that needed something the private version could never quite get enough of: attention, validation, the constant, reliable drip of external confirmation that she existed and mattered and was interesting enough to follow. And that need had grown until it was larger than the relationship, more important in the moments that counted than the man sitting in front of her. The karma in this story isn't a confrontation. It isn't a public humiliation. It isn't a dramatic final reckoning that you can point to and say, "There it is, justice served." The karma is slower and quieter and more honest than that. She chose the followers. She chose the likes. She chose the validation of strangers over the intimacy of someone who actually knew her. And when Marcus walked away, he didn't take a single follower with him. Her numbers didn't change. Her posts kept going up. But the one person she'd been performing for was gone. She had 301 people in her audience. Now she had 300, and she didn't notice for a day. Here's what this story is actually about. And I don't think it's what you expected when you clicked. It's not really about social media. Not at the core. Social media is just the surface, the specific contemporary form that the problem took. The deeper thing is older than Instagram, older than Snapchat, older than any platform. It's about what we sacrifice when we choose to be seen by many over being known by one. It's about what gets quietly hollowed out of a relationship when performance replaces presence. When the need to broadcast your life to an audience becomes more urgent than the need to share it with the person sitting next to you. It's about what happens to intimacy when intimacy stops being private. Marcus never wanted to control her. He never asked her to stop being who she was. He just wanted to be her person, not her viewer. He wanted the private version of her, the real one, the one that everyone who met her face to face immediately loved. And when he understood that he couldn't have that anymore, when he realized that the relationship he thought they had was never going to be available to him, he made the only decision that made any sense. He walked away, and she, by choosing her feed over her relationship, by arguing that vanity was a virtue, by refusing to hear a single thing he was trying to say, she let him go. The lesson, if there is one, isn't about social media limits or screen time or how many posts is too many. The lesson is about what we're really doing when we perform instead of connect. About what we're really asking for when we need 300 strangers to validate what one person who loves us could give us for free, if only we were willing to put the phone down long enough to receive it. Some lessons cost more than others. If this story made you feel something, if it made you think about the difference between being seen and being known, drop a like, leave a comment, and make sure you're subscribed. Because we bring you new stories of karma, justice, and the consequences people never see coming every single day. This is Cold Karma. We'll see you in the next one.